May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. What I love about this story that Jesus tells is so often his parables involve a landowner or a lord or some sort of king-like figure who is in the place of God. But in this story, it's just God himself saying, God's saying, you fool, you idiot. It's just a great story. I don't know if I wish God did that with me more often or not. You fool, Geoff. So this is another one of those stories where it's actually really helpful to sort of look into some of the words, because the Gospels are actually filled with wordplay. And to kind of get a sense of the essence of this story, when this man approaches Jesus about his family inheritance, and in the Gospel of Luke, this is really this kind of comes out of nowhere. And after the story, it dovetails into the passage about do not worry about what you have, and consider the lilies of the field who are clothed with all those beautiful things. But it sort of comes out of nowhere, really, this story. And he comes up to him and he asks Jesus about his family inheritance. And the word inheritance is the same word that we would use to describe our just rewards in heaven. It's sort of, in a way, it'd be the same word we'd use for salvation, one's heavenly reward and one's earthly reward. They would use the same word to describe both, an earthly inheritance and a heavenly inheritance, which is why Jesus uses the analogy in talking about the inheritance of God with this fellow describing and having his great inheritance of grain. This is a story about wealth, and Jesus tells this parable because it is so easy for us to confuse things that are ours and ideas that are ours with things that are God's. One of the great risks, and we find this throughout the Bible, we encounter this in Paul's letter this morning as well, is that wealth gives the illusion of the infinite. Wealth gives us the illusion of possession, that creation can somehow belong to us. There's a phenomena in our culture where we can buy things. If you go out and you buy a shirt, or you buy a car, or you buy an apple, in the rules and ways of our world, you technically own that thing forever, for all time, right? We don't really use these things for all time. I mean, you can own a car for eternity, and eventually the car will stop working, and you can apparently put it on your front lawn and leave it there for the next 30 years. I encounter that a lot in certain southern states, not to judge any southern United States, but there are a lot of cars on lawns because they technically own these cars forever. We own clothing forever, and we often, there are conventions of getting rid of things and throwing away things. But we believe that we can own things, land, water, resources, even though these things, water, for example, that's been drunk by millions and millions and millions of other creatures through hundreds of millions of years. The same water that we drink was drunk by every human that has ever lived, by the dinosaurs. We believe we can own land, and we do for a time, and then we die and we pass it on to somebody else. But there's something about our nature as human beings that we believe that wealth gives us a taste of the eternal. And this is something that leads to great destruction and leads us down a very dark path, especially if we fear our own demise. For some reason, we tend to surround ourselves with things that are eternal to protect our souls. And so we buy a lot of stuff. Translation, when we're stressed, we go to the mall. There's a lot of different versions of this same phenomena. If we were great leaders of nations, we might build great armies we build great closets of shirts. But it's the same mechanism. And throughout the ages, we have tried to figure out how to deal with this. For Aristotle's solution was to be magnanimous. A lot of the ancient solutions that we came up with were not to challenge the very heart of something that was destructive, but to figure out a way of taking some rather destructive urges and making them, pacify them and control them and structure them, right? That's the idea. A lot of the ideas behind the Ten Commandments was to structure human sin into decent places. And Aristotle tried the same thing. He came up with the idea, the concept of magnanimity. It's a $10 word. To be magnanimous. It's a great word. This was his solution. To be magnanimous was not simply to be generous. It was to, and in fact, one was only really magnanimous when one had wealth. You couldn't be very poor and very magnanimous. What you were when you were magnanimous was someone who spent all of their wealth and all of their time wisely and to the benefit of all. Whenever we judge celebrities, we're usually judging that whether or not they are magnanimous. They have great wealth. Have they spent it on the right things? Did they buy the right clothes? Are they on the fashion list of the top 10 fashion list, or the bottom, the worst dressed list? Have they bought the right cars? Do they live in the right neighborhood? We're very good as a society of judging people on whether or not they are magnanimous. A phenomenal example is, remember when Oprah would have her big thing where she would, maybe I'm the only one that, I can't be the only one that watches Oprah. You're all looking at me puzzled just because anyways, Oprah she would carefully select from among her things, very special things, and she would give them away for free. It was a demonstration of her great magnanimity, that she knew how to choose the right things, and then she gave them to the right people. If you recall in her show, she wouldn't just invite anybody. It was a very special show where she would select guests that had done incredible things. And they were people who were social workers and teachers and, someone who had suffered some violence through the military service. She would choose very special people. It was all a demonstration of her magnanimity, right? I chose the right people, and I chose the right things. And now that I have the right people and the right things, I'm going to be generous in as much as I can, right? And everybody loses their minds and cheers, right? She was magnanimous. And this is sort of when we talk about how our society tackles wealth, even though Christianity has been around for 2,000 years, it seems that we tend to use Aristotle's idea of wealth, which is not destructive, right? There's some wonderful things that Oprah did. But like almost everything with Christianity, Jesus was not particularly concerned with coming up with special rules to protect us from our rather base emotions and destructive tendencies. Jesus was preoccupied with challenging the very essence of human sin, the very essence of the deep darkness that dwells in us. It is why our symbol is that of the cross, that very darkest moment in human life, bringing about the very greatest moment, the eucatastrophe of resurrection, which is to say the opposite of catastrophe. So what does Jesus do? Jesus says, at the very heart of all of these issues around wealth is our desire to be like God, to be immortal, to clothe ourselves in infinity. For the wealthy, this is the great illusion that we can somehow be immortal, but then there are others of us who do not have great wealth. I was a grad student for 5 years, in university for 9, and before then, I lived at home and had basically no money. I spent the vast majority of my life not just with no money, but with vast negative wealth. This is still my wealth today. It is in negative numbers. And there are many, many people in our country who have taken on tremendous amounts of debt. And the danger of this concept of wealth as a kind of immortality, a kind of infinity, is that if you have poverty and you see wealth in this way, you are infinitely poor, infinitely useless in our society. You don't just have nothing, you have less than nothing, which is to say, you aren't just nothing, you are less than nothing. You are merely someone who owes someone else money. You owe someone else eternity. You owe someone else immortality. You are in debt to them in every way that you can imagine until you pay them back. If we believe as a society that wealth makes us immortal, then what do we do with those in our society with negative wealth? What place do they have? How will we treat them? How will we think of them? The challenge for us as Christians is really to take on the mantle that not a lot of people in society have the courage to do or the time to do, of seeing the world as Jesus sees it. To see these people in our world with negative wealth and see them as filled with possibility, filled with great gifts that are measured by Jesus. How much can I love? How much can I care? Am I a human being? These are the questions and the ways that we as Christians measure one another. Not how much do they owe, or are they magnanimous with the wealth that they have. We must not, as Christians, confuse those things which are of God and those things which are of the world and mix them up. That's my sermon this morning. Amen.